What is the Senate going to be able to agree to that the House can swallow?
Well, we haven't seen what it's going to be, so it's hard for us to say what we could agree to. And obviously, Chuck Schumer is the leader, majority leader here, and Mike Johnson, a great friend and a fellow Louisianian, is over there. So you're asking me a little bit to look at the Ouija board, and I'd like to see at least a few of the cards before I kind of comment upon your attempt to answer your question.
But, Senator, do you think that we could potentially see this government shutdown, 12:01, Saturday of next week?
I think that the House Republicans and the Senate in general are committed to the government not shutting down. For many reasons, I don't think it will. Or if it does, it'll, shut down for 8 hours or something like that. Now, if I knew for sure, obviously I'd be, looking at palms on Bourbon Street right now giving fortunes. So no one can know for sure, but I think there is a commitment from both sides, from Speaker Johnson and from the Senate, not to have a government shutdown. How that works out, I can't tell you, but I do think that's a commitment.
Well, so then it just becomes a question of how the different chambers are going to go about it, Senator. There's been a lot of conversation about things being packaged together on the Senate side, where the House is really trying to pursue single subject bills. How big do you think a potential multitude of minibuses or ultimately a megabus is going to be on the Senate side? What would you be okay with?
I'm not sure the House has shut the door on having a minibus, if you will. And for those watching who don't know what that means, an omnibus would be every spending bill all packaged into one, and a minibus would be 2, 3, or 4. So I think that the House might be open to a minibus. But again, there's a commitment, for example, to fund the military. The military has got lots of challenges around the world, and they don't want to continue to operate under last year's spending priorities. They've asked for updates. Congress has waited on updates. The military wishes to have the ability to respond to today's challenges, not those from a year ago. I think it's very reasonable. Again, Speaker Johnson has 2 military bases in his district, one Fort Johnson, formerly called Fort Polk. The other is Barksdale Air Force Base in Bossier. And so he is going to be sensitive to that. And that's just one example of why it's important to get a spending bill reflecting new priorities in a changing world, as opposed to merely continuing that which was from last year.
Well, speaking of the military, we heard from Senator Tommy Tuberville today, and he said, quote, "I want to get this over with." This is in terms of resolving the blockade he's put in Congress, in the Senate, on those military officials that the Senate is waiting to take votes on. Can you tell us, is there any impact now on the impasse? Is he going to remove that blockade?
Well, the meeting is still going on, and I'll let Senator Tuberville speak for himself. Since it's still going on, and I had to break for this in another meeting, I don't feel comfortable kind of giving, before the meeting's over, what's being said. But he would like to have it over. It's pretty clear from the discussion that we've had so far is that the administration kind of manufactured this. This was not intended to be DOD policy. The DOD policy they had before was working pretty well. And Coach Tuberville, he goes by Coach, feels as if the administration kind of set this up to be the cause that it is. But nonetheless, we're looking for solutions as to how it could resolve. By the way, there's only 12 people affected by this policy. And initially, the military had said it would be as many as 4,000. I can tell you that. So they put out a policy which was going to affect 4,000 people, kind of inviting a response from Coach Tuberville's perspective. So there's some areas to give on both sides, and I think he's very interested in seeing it resolved.
Well, Senator, as you look for a resolution on that issue, and I understand you don't want to pre-conclude the conclusion of the meeting if you had to step out of it, but what would your message be to the senator now when there are many officials who are saying that this is a national security issue that is impacting U.S. military readiness? I understand that he's the coach, but you're a member of his team, right? Do you have any sway over this?
Well, a couple things. First, I'd like to see it resolved. Let me just say that. And I do think that the people being punished are the people that have no role in this. I would like the person at Barksdale Air Force Base to get a promotion, and then that would trigger many other promotions behind him. So let me just first stipulate that. Secondly, I will point out that General Milley in September, the outgoing Joint Chief of Staff chairman, said that our military readiness is fine. So I don't want to have people panicking that military readiness has suffered because the people who are waiting on those promotions are deserving. They should get it, but they're also professionals and they're going to continue to do their job. And I'm just assuming that from what General Milley said. But then going forward, I don't want to underestimate it either. I would like to see this resolved. I would like to see those who are in queue to get promoted to be promoted. And I do think that that would benefit us in many ways. So I'm not giving you an answer, but that meeting's still going on.
All right, well, we look forward to finding out what's happening in that closed-door meeting. Senator, I'm also going to be traveling with the president next week when he is set to meet with Xi Jinping on the side of APEC. And you're calling for a pollution fee when it comes out of China. How would this work? And wouldn't this end up impacting the cost of goods on U.S. consumers, thus being a tax?
So a couple things. I am introducing a foreign pollution fee. If you look at what happens now, the United States enforces environmental standards, which somewhat increases the cost of manufacturing. China does not enforce those environmental standards by and large, which decreases their cost of manufacturing. That incentivizes companies to set up their manufacturing units in China. And China uses that economic growth to fuel its military and its foreign policy kind of policies and strategies. That's bad for the United States. One, it's bad because we're losing the jobs. It's bad because now China emits 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions all over the world. And it's bad because the resulting economic strength from polluting and stealing jobs is now being used to fund their military adventures. What we would do is just level the playing field. Put a fee roughly commensurate with the avoided cost of actually trying to enforce environmental regulations. So if this is how much we have to pay as an industry for a certain type of good, then that's what the fee would be on that good coming over from China. We think it is a peaceful way by which to rein in a way by the unfair trade practices that is fueling their military growth, and therefore a peaceful way to decrease the risk of war going forward. In terms of increasing cost upon U.S. consumers, I frankly think that it won't be. One, because China can get out from underneath the fees. All they have to do is lower their greenhouse gas emission profile. They just have to adopt international norms, however they wish to do so, in terms of how much pollution they generate. If they do that, well, they may have an increased cost of compliance because of an increased cost of a good because they're complying with international norms. But isn't that a good thing? We pay a little extra for products here because we don't want polluted waters and we don't want polluted ocean and we don't want polluted air. Why shouldn't China do the same thing? So we think our foreign pollution fee is totally commensurate with free market economics. We are taxing an externality.